A big anaconda invaded this whole village, eating livestock, swallowing little children, and destroying everything in its path. In the heart of an African jungle, between two powerful rivers, lay the vibrant village of Adu. Adu was a place of life and laughter, where the people worked together, cultivating the land and respecting the mystical balance between nature and their everyday lives. Their leader, Chief Owusu, was a man of wisdom and strength, known for guiding his people through thick and thin. He led the village with a keen understanding of the land, honoring the spirits of the jungle, river, and sky, ensuring that tradition and respect shaped every decision. But one humid afternoon, whispers of strange happenings began to reach Owusu's ears. The animals were behaving oddly. Livestock refused to graze, and the wild creatures of the jungle seemed skittish. Elders gathering near the chief's hut spoke in hushed tones about these omens, recalling old stories of spirits who took the form of animals to punish or test the hearts of men. Owusu was unsettled, but reassured the villagers that he would keep watch and call upon the spirit for guidance if the signs persisted. As the full moon rose that night, casting a glow over the land, a chill filled the air. Most villagers lay asleep, comforted by the warm familiarity of their hut. But Chief Owusu stayed awake, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He gazed into the jungle, its darkness thick and impenetrable, wondering if the stories the elders spoke of were about to unfold once more. His heart raced as he noticed the strange quietness. No sounds of cricket, no night birds, only a deep, unsettling silence. Unbeknownst to him, lurking in the heart of the jungle was a powerful force, an ancient serpent born from the darkest depths, with scales as black as night and a hunger as endless as the rivers. This creature was no ordinary snake. Adu had lived in harmony with the jungle for generations, but tonight everything seemed strange. The night seemed to grow colder, as if warning the village of Adu about an impending storm. Though the skies remained clear, a full moon hung in the sky, illuminating the village with a silver glow. As the villagers drifted to sleep, a soft hissing sound echoed from deep within the jungle, growing louder as it came close to the edge of Adu. Animals in the village grew restless. Goats bleated nervously, and chickens rustled in their coops. Suddenly, a loud scream shattered the silence. Villagers sprung from their beds, looking around in confusion. Then a monstrous shadow slithered out of the jungle, and gasps of terror rippled through the village as the people beheld the source of the noise, an anaconda larger than anyone had ever seen. Its body was thick and powerful, each scale glinting darkly under the moonlight. The serpent's eyes glowed a sinister red, and it seemed to move with a purpose, crushing anything that lay in its path. Chaos erupted as the snake began destroying livestock pens, swallowing goats and chickens in its enormous jaws. Mothers clutched their children, pulling them away from the monster's rampage. People shouted in terror as huts collapsed, trampled under the creature's weight. With every move, the snake's power was undeniable, an unstoppable force sent from the jungle's darkest hearts. Chief Owusu emerged from his hut, witnessing the destruction with a heavy heart. As the villagers looked to him for guidance, he raised his hands, commanding their attention. "Stay calm," he shouted, his voice steady despite his fear. "I will confront this beast." The villagers gathered behind him, holding their breath as he walked towards the snake, chanting ancient protective incantations, words that had protected their ancestors from dangers unseen. But the snake, unmoved by his words, only hissed louder. Its eyes locked on the people it had come to destroy. The serpent had come with a purpose, but none could understand its reason. And as Chief Owusu stood before it, fear gripped his heart. The peace they had known was now shattered. As Chief Owusu stood with his staff held firmly in his hand, a symbol of his leadership and the strength of his people, his heart pounded, but he masked his fear with the wisdom and bravery expected of a chief. The serpent's gaze turned to him, unblinking, as if recognizing that Owusu was the leader. It paused its destruction, staring intently, its tongue flicking in and out, as though tasting the air, sensing his intentions. As the villagers looked on, Chief Owusu began chanting louder, calling upon the spirit of the jungle, the river, and the ancestors who had watched over Adu for generations. His voice echoed through the village, carrying his pleas for protection. But instead of calming, the snake grew agitated, thrashing its powerful tail and crushing a nearby hut to splinters. Loud screams filled the air as people retreated, realizing the beast would not be tamed. Owusu soon realized his words held no power over this creature. Its rage was beyond his understanding, as though it had harbored a grudge. But he couldn't allow it to harm his people any further. Desperate, he ordered the strongest men in the village to gather spears and try to drive the beast away. His warriors assembled quickly, each trembling but determined to defend their home. As the armed men surrounded the snake, the serpent lifted its massive head, glaring at each of them with a deadly gleam in its eyes. They were gripped by terror, but Owusu shouted, "Do not fear, Adu's strength lies within us. We protect our own." But before they could act, the snake let out a deafening hiss, sending them stumbling back in fright. Owusu watched, his heart heavy, as the serpent slithered onward, leaving a path of ruin in its wake. He realized then that the village's survival rested on more than their strength. It depended on understanding the reason for this creature's rage. Ademore, Chief Owusu's daughter, had watched the entire scene from behind a tree, her heart racing as she witnessed the devastation. Unlike the others, she wasn't simply frightened. She felt a connection to the snake, a strange pull that made her chest tighten. Ademore possessed a rare and unspoken gift. She could sense the spirit of the land, their emotions and intentions. She had often felt the heartbeat of the jungle, the energy of the rivers, and the spirit of the animals around her. Tonight, however, the serpent's anger was like a shadow over her soul, dark and fierce. Unable to resist, she took a step forward, calling softly to the snake, "Why do you harm us? What have we done?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet the serpent's eyes shifted towards her, sensing her presence. Ademore's heart pounded, but she remained rooted, staring into its red, piercing gaze. She could feel the creature's pain, an ancient sorrow that tugged at her heart. The serpent became still, focusing entirely on Ademore. She felt its anger dissipate slightly, replaced by something else, curiosity and recognition. But as she reached out with her mind, trying to calm it, the villagers cried out in fear, pulling her back to reality. The snake's rage flared again, and it reared back, jaws wide, hissing furiously. "Ademore, run!" her father shouted, but she was transfixed, frozen by the creature's gaze. The serpent's eyes bored into her, as though seeing something in her that none could understand. Her father's shouts grew frantic, but before she could respond, the snake lunged forward, wrapping around her in its powerful coils, lifting her off the ground. Her scream pierced the night, sending chills through everyone's spine. And in one swift motion, the serpent slithered away into the jungle, taking Ademore with it. The villagers stood in shock, staring at the spot where Ademore had been just moments before. Chief Owusu let out a heart-wrenching cry that broke the stillness. "No!" he shouted, dropping to his knees, his fist pounding the earth in despair. His beloved daughter had been taken by the beast, and he could only imagine the terror she must have felt in those final moments. But he could not afford to stay paralyzed by grief. Wiping his tears, Owosu gathered the village warriors once again, their faces hardened by the memory of Ademo's screams. He called upon every able-bodied man in the village to join him, determined to save his daughter from the monster that had claimed her. Armed with spears and courage, they set off into the jungle, following the trail of broken branches and deep grooves on the earth left by the serpent. The jungle was dark and dense, the shadows stretching endlessly, concealing both danger and hope. The men walked cautiously, the sounds of their footsteps mingling with the distant rustling of leaves. Each one felt a chill in his bones, knowing that any misstep could lead them to the creature they both sought and feared. As they ventured deeper, the silence grew heavier, as if the jungle itself watched, waiting. They called for Ademo, their voices trembling as they shouted her name, but there was no response, only the haunting quiet of the forest. The further they went, the more hopeless the search felt. The dense trees and tangled undergrowth seemed to mock their effort, as if reminding them that they were intruding upon sacred ground, chasing something beyond human control. Owosu's heart pounded with both hope and fear. He would not give up, not until he knew, one way or another, what had become of his daughter. They kept going further into the jungle. They followed the destruction the serpent had left in its path: uprooted trees, crushed vegetation, and traces of scales imprinted in the mud. The jungle seemed alive with hostility, each step filled with strange sounds and unsettling sights. Yet, the men held firm, driven by the urgency to save Ademo. Owosu had an unwavering resolve, but a sharp cry from one of the warriors brought his attention to a bloody piece of Ademo's cloth caught on a tree branch. Seeing it both broke his heart and strengthened his resolve. As they moved forward, they reached a narrow pathway that seemed to descend into the heart of the jungle's darkness. Owosu and the others took the path cautiously, knowing it could lead to either Ademo or something far worse. It was so dark. The men lit their torches and began to whisper prayers, calling upon their ancestors and the forest spirits to guide them. The jungle seemed to close in on them. Each step felt like they were moving towards danger. Chief Owosu thought of his daughter, imagining her fear and hopelessness. Memories of Ademo's laughter and innocence went through his mind as he silently swore that he would not return without her. Just as they were about to give up for the night, they came upon a clearing. The scene before them sent chills down their spines, remnants of crushed plant, twisted earth, and the unmistakable slither marks of the serpent. They realized how close they were, but fear settled heavily on them. Was it too late? As the men inspected the clearing, a figure emerged from the shadows, an old woman, bent with age, but with her eyes glowing with light. The villagers recoiled, but Owosu approached her cautiously, sensing she might know something about the creature. The old woman's voice crackled as she warned, "You seek the child, but the serpent guards are fiercely. It is no ordinary beast. It is the jungle spirit in its most vengeful form. To challenge it is to challenge the forces that have existed long before you." Owosu, desperate, pleaded with her for help. She simply shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow. The jungle's wrath can only be appeased by sacrifice. You may reach her, but to bring her back, not all of you may return. Despite these words, Owosu was undeterred. He thanked the woman and pressed on, the men following closely behind him, though fear gripped all of them. After hours of trekking deeper into the jungle, Owosu and his men reached a large dark cavern, half hidden beneath the roots of a colossal tree. The smell of decay lingered, and a silence unlike anyone that they had ever encountered before enveloped the space. It was as though the jungle itself stood still, watching them and waiting. In the dim light, they caught a glimpse of Ademo's clothing scattered at the entrance. Owosu's heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. Taking a deep breath, he entered the cave, clutching his spear with a resolve that bordered on desperation. Inside, he saw the shadow of the serpent, a massive coil that shimmered in the torchlight, its powerful body twisted around Ademo, who lay motionless, her face pale. Owosu took a step forward, his voice shaking as he called out to her. But before he could reach her, the serpent lifted its head, its crimson eyes locking onto him with a look of unmistakable malice. The men froze at the serpent, its body massive and powerful, coiled tighter around Ademo, as though daring them to make a move. Chief Owosu, with a breaking voice, pleaded with the creature, offering himself in place of his daughter. But the serpent's eyes showed no mercy, only an ancient anger that went beyond human understanding. In a swift, horrifying moment, the serpent lifted Ademo in its coils and with a final piercing look at Owosu, vanished into the shadows of the jungle. The last thing they heard was Ademo's fading scream, echoing through the dense forest, leaving the men paralyzed in shock and despair. The warriors fell to their knees, realizing the jungle had claimed her. Owosu was left devastated, his heart shattered as he understood that he had not only lost his daughter but had also unleashed a force they could not control. In the days that followed, the village of Adu mourned. Though they had searched for Ademo, she was never found. Rumors of the serpent's wrath grew, spreading fear throughout the neighboring lands. Owosu's grief soon turned into a silent resolve. He would find a way to face the jungle's wrath and bring back his daughter, even if it meant venturing into the heart of darkness again. Alright, so what did you learn from this story? Share it in the comment section. And please subscribe to this channel right now and turn on post notification so that whenever a story is posted, you'll be the first to get notified and you'll be the first to watch. Like and share this. Don't forget to drop your lessons in the comment section. Subscribe and see you in our next story. Bye bye.